Hello everyone, and welcome back to another fun time listening to me ramble on about video games. Today we're talking about Supermassive Games' smash horror hit Until Dawn. It goes without saying, but I'm gonna say it anyway. Spoilers ahead for the entire game. Until Dawn is really something best experienced with fresh eyes. I highly recommend checking the game out, whether it's in a let's play or playing the game by yourself before you continue on this video. Introduction. Until Dawn is a game I have a strange fascination with. I both love it and in some instances hate it. There's so much going on and so many characters to juggle between, and yet Until Dawn strikes a fantastic balance between it all. One thing that this game excels at is setting up characters with stock personalities only to allow them to then organically grow into actual people as they experience the horrors of the mountain. At the beginning, the game conditions you to find certain people more likable than others, the most noticeable being Mike and Emily as antagonistic at the start. Mike especially is incredibly fascinating to watch go through his journey, but I'll save my discussion on him for his own segment later. After all, these characters bring so much to this game, it's only fair that they get a chance in the spotlight to shine. I'm going to break down my thoughts and feelings on each character in their own little segments, with some attention to the plot and antagonist beats later. Without further rambles, let's get into it.
So tell me, in this little game you're playing so diligently, who is it that you most dislike?
The characters. Considering everything that brings this game together, it's no secret that the characters are the meat of this game, pun intended. Just about everything revolves around them, and the plot point of Wendigos isn't even brought to the knowledge of the player until deep into the story in the final chapters. The characters drive this story, and the dangers from Josh's prank and the Wendigos only have weight because of the cast dynamics and how they feed off of each other. If they didn't, then there would be no driving force and their relationships wouldn't bounce off each other quite as satisfyingly. You can even tell how the characters are feeling based on how they addressed each other, like when Emily yells Michael when he scares her and Matt at the beginning, but calls him Mike in every other instance. Let's go through each one and break down my thoughts on each character. Sam. Of all the characters, you could argue that Sam goes through the least development. This, I believe, is very intentional. There's a reason she starts off the game so likable and friendly. She's also, aside from Beth, the first character you play as and the first perspective you get in the time skip. She's kind and caring right off the bat and serves as a grounding rock to the player. You naturally want to get behind her, and as she has the most level thoughts throughout their scenarios. She doesn't cry like Ashley or lash out like Emily, and she's not violent like Chris and Mike. All things considered, she handles the situation with some grace, given how she's only 19. Overall, there's not too much to say about Sam. Mostly she stays the same, but that's because she's needed to be that grounding figure in the beginning, and the one people can attach to the easiest in the hell mess that is this game's events. Chris. Chris goes through quite the change. It's not as much as Mike, who we'll get to, but it's still a sizable amount. Chris starts off feeling like a bit of a jerk, almost a kind of jock stereotype. He's arrogant and a bit headstrong at the beginning, but once things start to pick up, he shows more sides to himself. He does get thrown into arguably more intense situations from Josh's games than the others. Ashley and Sam get knocked out rather fast in their scenarios, but Chris is the one forced to make the decisions, forced to have an active role in his choices. The saw with Josh, the gun choice with Ashley, pick your poison. He has to actively make these decisions as they're happening. It's not a simple run or hide, fight or flight. He doesn't get that choice. That's what makes Chris unique, and his change all the better. It gives us yet another angle to the ever-changing dynamic of these characters. Jessica. Jessica is going to fuck Michael, and don't you forget it. Okay, but in the opening segments of the game, Jessica plays a frontal role. She's very prominent in a lot of the characters' arcs, especially Mike's. But in terms of her character, she doesn't get a chance to change as much as the others. If he successfully save her, she shows up in the final chapters for one last life or death moment with a Wendigo, and if Matt survives as well, he appears here too. But this is so far down the line, you're not given time to see the characters grow like the others. If there's one thing that feels a little rushed and inconclusive, it's Matt and Jessica's place in the second act of the game. In the beginning, they feel very relevant and have chemistry with the other characters. But then when they disappear for the rest of the game and don't even reunite in the game with the others in a satisfying moment, we never get to see Mike's reaction to Jessica's survival, nor Emily with Matt's. Those would be satisfying conclusion moments that directly relate to the characters' relationships, especially with how Emily and Matt can change their views of each other so much in the opening sections. Matt. Matt is an interesting one, although not much to talk about with him. There's so little for him to do, but he's such a sweetie. Much like Jess, he loses relevance after the first half. Most of his important decisions are made early on, while leaving him less important to the second half of the game's plot. It's almost hard to believe he was involved in the prank at the beginning, given how kind and understanding he acts in his first scenes. Even when you choose the options to snap at Mike, for example, he still maintains a level of coolness and respect. He's a likable character, but like I said in Jessica's part before, he doesn't get that room to grow like he should. Emily. Emily is purposely made to be the bitchiest character imaginable, and I personally love her for it. Right off the bat, she breeds a hostile atmosphere and serves to initiate a lot of the first forms of conflict. However, given the scenarios they find themselves in, Emily feels like the most reasonable to be freaking out like she does. She's somewhat level-headed in her logical reasoning, but applies a degree of urgency and franticness to her speech. It's why she sounds whiny and desperate to push everyone around to do what she thinks is best. In some circumstances, you can agree with her line of thinking, like using the fire tower to get in contact with rangers for help. Not only this, but she ends up quite the badass if you let her. Take this scene for example.
Oh, God. Here goes $600. Better be worth it. I look great in that top. Alright. Now we're talking.
She understands the desperation of her scenario, and where she was kicking a fuss up about losing her bag before, now she's adapted to the needs of her situation. To put it lightly, she becomes one tough bitch. And that's Emily's strength, her adaptiveness. Where others cannot handle the pressure of the mind chasers and sheer close calls with the Wendigos, Emily is able to go above and beyond. If you let her, of course. Ashley. Ah yes, the dumb one. Not to be totally mean to Ashley, given how she seems the youngest and most innocent of them all. All things considered, she seems to react the most reasonably to the whole situation. You have to remember, these kids are 19, and you're barely an adult at that age. You're still so young, and especially after the Beth and Hannah tragedy, having all this torture and ghost tricks played on you when you don't even know who's behind it, or what's behind it, I can't blame her for acting how she does. Even if we find her the most annoying of the lot because of it. But there has to be a degree of irrationality amongst them, and without Ashley, things would feel like they progressed a little too smoothly with the others. Josh. There's not much to say about Josh. He's purposely the only character you don't play as in the first half of the game, since his death is supposed to be a red herring. As such, you're never really engaging as him with him. aside from the therapy sections which aren't revealed until later to be a hallucination of his mind. There is also some evidence and clues you can find in the game involving Josh's year after his sister's disappearance that point to mental health issues Josh is suffering from. To summarize, they make the case that Josh is being treated for the wrong condition. It's believed that Josh's symptoms align more with schizophrenia than depression, which is what doctors were trying to treat him for. This is very bad and really puts Josh's struggles and actions into perspective. Anyway, I don't have much else to say about him. His importance is to push the other characters forward, and that's basically why he exists. He really does pull the short straw in this game. Gotta feel sorry for the guy. He needed help, but he couldn't communicate that to everyone in his life, and no one realized until it was too late. Mike. I think most people would agree with me when I say Mike is an exceptional character. No one goes through more personality and character growth than him. In the beginning, Mike is made out to be a typical jock character. He's brash, rude, and very unlikable, but this is done on purpose. There's a reason you spend most of your time with him in the game. For a character's growth to feel organic, they need a lot of screen time and chances to grow. You have to see them start to question their behavior and learn to identify with what was problematic about it in the beginning. With Mike, the first instance that kicks this off is the stream of just really fucked up shit he has to deal with. It starts with Jessica's abduction and the wild chase through the forest, which really shocks him out of his comfort cockiness he has up until that moment. From there, he only gets thrown into more dangerous and messed up scenarios. Of all of them, it's no surprise Mike goes through the most growth when he's forced into the most extreme scenarios. Sure, he doesn't really have to deal with Josh's torture games, but he still has something much worse. Actual danger. He might not be able to die during all the beginning sections and his several trips to the sanatorium, but he portrays the danger of the mountain to the player faster than the other characters. The only other one before the last chapters who take you through the mines is Emily, giving you access to more clues about Beth and Hannah's disappearance and close-ups of the Wendigo. Is it a coincidence that the two characters given trashy personalities in the beginning are the ones who show you where the true danger lies in the story? Given all of the detail and intricacies that have gone into this game, I don't think so. The Wendigos. So I've barely mentioned these beasts, even though they're the antagonists of the game. They're incredibly well designed, super creepy, super gross to look at, and their movements are so sporadic and jerky and very unhuman. But that's the point. It's perfect. I hate them and it's perfect. Personally, I think the Wendigo should have been introduced just a little earlier in the game. Chapter 8 feels like it's leaving it so late, but then 8, 9, and 10 are full of twists and turns and a lot happens. That's enough, and it is satisfying for what you see of them. And when you replay the game and find those moments where the Wendigos flicker through you across your path, it makes it all the more chilling knowing what's actually happening. The plot. We'll briefly touch on the plot too here as an end note. The game is broken up into two main sections, Josh's prank execution and the Wendigo's survival at the end. The Wendigo fight is spread over the final 3 chapters, with life or death stakes really ramped up there. Despite how I wish they were introduced slightly earlier, I do greatly enjoy the path the last chapters take you down. Weaving back through the sanatorium and the mines after learning all the information the old man had about the Wendigos, you start to find more evidence of what happened to the miners, and at the end, Hannah. There is a nice transition between the end of Josh's saga and the start of the Wendigos. It marks the reveal of the old man who's been trolling the woods. Emily runs into the crew who just dealt with tying Josh up for his reveal and proceeds to pour out scattered information on her recent Wendigo encounter. Almost immediately after, Mike runs in, and with everyone together, the old man shows up, ready to steer the characters in the right direction against the Wendigos. Conclusion. Until Dawn is a game I find I can't stop thinking about. The smallest things will remind me of it and bring a level of reflection I don't consider much with other games. There's just something about Until Dawn, something at its core that makes it so darn likable and keeps me coming back to absorb more. And I think that's the characters. You could put them in all manner of scenarios, throw all kind of beasts and evils at them, and they'd grow and form and shape around them in a similar way. The way you come to love and enjoy. Because these teenagers all have something keeping them going that brings us along for the journey too. And that something they have to do is to survive until dawn. Thanks for watching.